So Mr. Chrysler laid the groundwork for generations to come with his emphasis on advancement, technology, design, just really being a leader in all aspects of the industry. So while concept cars, most people think they just look cool and they're neat to see at the auto show, there's really a purpose behind them. It's to allow our designers and engineers to team up, work together, and bring out advancements, whether it's components for the concept car that are new to the industry or the look of the vehicle that's new. It allows them to do fun stuff, whether it's the headlights or the tail lights or even a door handle. All of those may make it to production cars. It all started with the 1934 Airflow, the first production car to be designed using a wind tunnel. I actually worked with Wilbur Wright to build a wind tunnel in the scale models. That vehicle was innovative in the fact that it had a tubular steel frame. They distributed the weight differently than other automobiles. They moved the front axle forward and the rear axle back to give it a better ride. They called it scientific engineering at the time. So, the Airflow was considered the first modern vehicle. That's how they advertised it. And it was different than anything else anybody was building. We get into the 1940s, and in 1941 they brought out two limited production vehicles, the Newport and the Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt was interesting because it was the first vehicle to have hidden headlights. You pushed a button and the headlight doors open. You pushed a button and the vehicle started. That was totally new. Nobody had done that. Everybody does it now, but Chrysler's did it in 1941. It had a one-piece retractable hardtop. Nobody had ever done that before. Now, these things didn't necessarily make it to production. The hidden headlights did in the 1942 DeSoto, but it was a chance to give our engineers and designers an ability to step out, to think, to make advancements. In the 1950s, we hired Virgil Exner as a designer. So Virgil Exner came in and started designing a whole series of concept vehicles. It was important because a lot of these design cues actually made it into the production vehicles, and they still resonate today. It started with the Chrysler K310, then they did the Chrysler Special, which is an interesting story because Ghia of Italy built the bodies for these vehicles. They're designed here in the United States. So they built 43 Chrysler Specials, and they were only sold in Paris, except for one that came to the United States, which we're fortunate enough to have in our collection. What's funny is Mr. Exner was doing these smaller concept cars, but he's also responsible for all the later 1950s designs, basically the fins. The forward look era and the birth of the fins on cars really came from Mr. Exner. It started very small in 1955 on the Chrysler 300s and New Yorkers. Got a little bit bigger in 1956, and then 1957 put the large fins on the vehicles. In 1951, we brought out power steering. In 1952, power brakes. There was cruise control. What we know is cruise control, they called autopilot back in the day. That was first seen on a Chrysler in 1959. We even were crazy enough, we put a record player in a car. It was mounted underneath the dashboard, but it was really the industry's first personalized entertainment system. No longer did you have to rely on the radio, you could pick the music you were listening to. One important thing we did was the Chrysler Turbine program. We started installing turbine engines in cars in 1954. These are all test vehicles. The program ran up till 1981, and the whole purpose of the program was to see if there's a different way than what we know as an internal combustion engine, if there's something else. And so the turbine engine had 80% less parts. It ran at higher temperatures and higher RPMs. It would run on almost any kind of fuel, anything that would burn. Kerosene, jet fuel, diesel. It was just neat, and it just shows that how in 1950s we were looking at technology that we're still looking at today on what different fuels can we power our vehicles on. Throughout the 1970s and the early 1980s, the industry was changing quite a bit. We were going from large vehicles to much smaller ones, brought out front-wheel drive vehicles, and we really weren't testing the waters with concept cars for many years. But in 1989, that all changed with the Portofino. We were associated with Lamborghini at the time. Our engineers, Lamborghini's engineers, and our international design team got together, put together this rear-engine vehicle powered by a Lamborghini, but its design kind of blew everybody away. People weren't expecting it on a Chrysler at the time. It was really our first step into what became 30 plus years now of being at the forefront of design of the automobile. So in the mid-1990s, our design team was, one of the chiefs and leaders was Tom Gale, a legend in the design community. He and Bob Lutz working together came up with the idea of the Atlantique, a concept car that you won't forget after you see it. It looks like, and took a lot of its design cues from the Bugattis of the 1930s, classic vehicles. When we brought that out, I think it was debuted at the Detroit Auto Show, the world was stunned. It was just an incredible vehicle, and they actually looked at going production with it, but it was just would be too expensive for the tooling, and it was too specific of a vehicle. When it was introduced, the Kronos was something special. The designers looked back to those designs of Virgil Exner's show cars in the early 1950s, and they actually took right from it. The grille that's on the vehicle would fit on any one of those other concepts he did back then. So what they did was they created a long wheelbase, elegant vehicle that's elegant inside and out, and is really an instant classic. So the Fighter Power, it was introduced in 2005 at the North American International Auto Show. It's a two-seat sport coupe that is one of my favorites. It's built on a Viper chassis with a 6.1-liter Hemi engine powering it. It's long hood to fit that large engine. The rear is real tight and performance-oriented. It looks like a sports car, and it really exudes the Chrysler brand's elegance and performance of the time. It's just a gorgeous car. So the ME412 is just a really, really cool car. It looks like a supercar. It is a supercar that was very close to becoming production. It had a mid-engine, where that's where the ME comes from. They actually built and tested a second vehicle, and this vehicle at our Chelsea Proving Grounds was doing laps at over 200 miles an hour. So they expected it to probably hit about 240 miles an hour in performance. Really wish we had built it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful car. The Chrysler brand has been a leader in many things, whether it's design, engineering, or safety, or technology. The brand's been at the forefront all these years, and it's really become an iconic American brand that has led from the front.
Hey, you are Windsor, both?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Windsor.
Oh, cool. I heard from Dave that there is a
Front end?
front end.
Yeah, been here almost 50 years.
You can walk standing, and then she's gonna.
Why did you do that? You should stay around.
And was there? How many years did you work before you retired?
Listen. There's more, but I'll go up. I saw the picture. I didn't see the.
Not yet. Yeah, it'll be a surprise. These two, they're the happy birthday duo. So Antonio's gonna give you the cue. He's where? Nice to meet you.
Oh yeah, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
We continue to carry forward Mr. Chrysler's initial vision of leading with new innovation, engineering excellence, and investments in our bright future. To commemorate this special day, I'd like to invite Ms. Chris Fuel to join me in unveiling a very special piece of art, a very special mural done by one of our Windsor Assembly Plant employees, Mr. Wes Bailey.
Let's go!
You really know. Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Anybody else want to sign? Fingerprint? There's wipes on the table for you after.
Get a thumbprint.
That means 100 years in Polish.
Oh.
When you send him here to do 31 more. Everybody's got to go back.
Smile.
Smiling.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Somebody dicking in the front. Okay. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Walter Chrysler was one of the 20th century's greatest automotive pioneers. He was really ahead of his time, and he was there at the birth of the industry and worked his way up and really became an automotive legend. So Mr. Chrysler was born in 1875 in Kansas. He was the son of a locomotive engineer, which was a big-time job back then. That was the most impressive job you could really have in the West. His father wanted him to go on to college and not pursue a life on the railroad. Walter had other ideas. He was very mechanically inclined. While he was in high school, he was subscribing to Scientific American and all these other publications to broaden his knowledge. He really wanted to work on locomotives. So against his father's wishes, actually, he got a job in the roundhouse, first sweeping the floors, then he became an oiler. He worked his way up to become a mechanic on the trains. Actually, there wasn't like a Snap-on truck that came to the shops. He had to borrow other people's tools and copy them by hand. So very famously, Walter B. Chrysler's toolbox became a thing, and it's still in existence, still in the family's hands. He was so successful that he worked his way up to becoming head of locomotive power for one of the railroads. It was the height of the mechanical age then, and he reached the pinnacle of what he could do. He was on a business trip to Chicago in 1908, and the Chicago Auto Show was going on. So he and a friend visited it, and he realized that first visit that the automobile was going to replace the locomotive. This was the new form of transportation. And before he left, he bought his first car, a locomobile. He had it shipped back to his home in Pennsylvania. And there, he and his brother Ed took it apart and put it back together 3 times before he ever tried to drive it. He just wanted to know how an automobile worked. But he knew it was going to replace the horse and carriage, the locomotive, so he wanted to be a part of this. He got a call from Willie Durant, the head of General Motors, and he was asked to come to Flint, Michigan to run Buick's manufacturing process. He jumped at the chance. He came to Flint in 1912 and began working his way up through Buick. He was the head of manufacturing. Eventually he became a vice president at all of General Motors, still in charge of Buick manufacturing. Mr. Chrysler was a strong-willed man, and so was Willie Durant, and they butted heads a few too many times. So at the age of 45, Mr. Chrysler retired for the first time. He walked away a very wealthy man, set for life. He didn't need to do anything else. In 1920, the board of Willie Overland reached out to Mr. Chrysler and asked him to come and help them get out of receivership. They were in a bad financial footing. So he went there on the agreement that he'd be paid $1 million for a year, which was an incredible salary for the time. But he was successful. In that 1 year, he turned that company around. Right after that happened, the board of Maxwell Motor Car Company called him. They were also in financial straits and had a little problem at the time. So he went to Maxwell in 1922. And during that time, he had 3 engineers, Zeter, Skeleton, and Breer. They called them the 3 Musketeers. He had them work in secret in a factory in Elizabeth, New Jersey on a car that he wanted to put his name on. The vehicle was lower, a little sleeker than most of the era, but the big things were the mechanicals. It had a higher compression 6-cylinder engine, higher than most that were available at the time. And then it also had four-wheel hydraulic brakes as standard equipment. That was a big deal. You could get four-wheel hydraulic brakes on some of the upper-level cars, the expensive ones, but it was always an option. But Mr. Chrysler believed in safety and power and continuous improvement in the automobile. And so in late 1923, they tooled up. In 1924, they started building the Chrysler 6. And these were sold through Maxwell dealerships, existing dealer franchises all over the country. The car was a great success, and it actually outsold the Maxwells. So in June of 1925, Mr. Chrysler took the assets of Maxwell and transformed it into the Chrysler Corporation and incorporated on June 6, 1925. The brand started in 1924, the company in 1925. Mr. Chrysler understood he wanted to grow the company. The Chrysler brand was kind of in the high price class, and he understood he needed multiple brands. So in the mid-1920s, they started developing two other brands, which became Plymouth and DeSoto. But something even bigger happened in 1928. Mr. Chrysler had the opportunity to buy the Dodge brothers. Now this was huge because Chrysler was a small company and only 4 years old, whereas Dodge was established and had Dodge Main. Dodge Main was a plant where iron and ore came in one end and a car drove out the other end. So for $144 million cash, the largest cash transaction in U.S. history up to that time, Mr. Chrysler bought the Dodge brand. So now he had, the upper price Chrysler, mid-level Dodge and DeSoto, and low-price class Plymouth. The timing was excellent because the Depression hit the following year, 1929. By having the low-price Plymouth, the company was able to survive the Depression. Without that brand, they wouldn't have survived. It became the second best-selling car in the United States. But if he hadn't stepped out of the box and taken a risk in 1928, we wouldn't be here talking about this today.
Fred, I think you and your engineers have done a great job. You've not only retained the outstanding features you put into our 1932 Dodge cars, but you've gone beyond what I expected could be accomplished.
Mr. Chrysler, we've put everything we had into this new Dodge car. It's got that good old Dodge dependability, plus everything that the public want today.
Fred, you're proud of this car, aren't you?
You're damn right I am.
So Walter Chrysler led the company from 1924 to 1935. At that point, he was chairman, and Walter decided it was time for him to retire. He had already built the Chrysler building in New York, so it was time for him to retire to his home in New York. Unfortunately, he had a stroke in 1938 and passed away in 1940.
Automobiles have played a tremendous part in the growth and progress of this nation in the last quarter of a century. Many of you here today can remember the time when an automobile was a curiosity and there were only about 1,000 cars in the whole United States.
Mr. Chrysler's idea of continuous improvement lasted many years after he had left the company. So Chrysler was the first on many things. The Airflow, which was Mr. Chrysler's baby when it came out in 1934, that was advertised as the first modern automobile because it truly was. It was designed using a wind tunnel, had tubular steel frame. There was safety padded dashes. So it was really like a continuous thing well up into the 1950s when power steering was brought out by the corporation, push button transmission. There was always something going on, and it was an engineering company. All of these different things were industry leading advancements that can go right back to the thoughts that Mr. Chrysler put into the company with his emphasis on advancement, technology, design, just really being a leader in all aspects of the industry.
Für mehr Videos einfach abonnieren.